All right, Tom Woods is a historian, a libertarian, and a New York Times best-selling author who wrote The Politically Incorrect Guide to American History. He wrote Meltdown. He has a book called Bernie Sanders is Wrong. He has two podcasts, Contra Krugman, where he refutes Paul Krugman's weekly columns, and he has another called The Tom Woods Show, which you can find on tomwoods.com. And you can also visit tomsfreebooks.com and get a free digital copy of one of Tom's books. This is a pre-recorded interview. We talked to Tom about the things people aren't learning about American history. Tom, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Let's begin with this. I mean, one of the most popular history books among young people is Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States, and it gets promoted on movies. In that picture, Good Will Hunting, they sell it very strongly as a radical way of looking at the world. I was happy to see in this new movie Lady Bird, the kind of jerk is reading it, the kind of abuser is reading the book. But basically, the idea of this book is that America is always in the wrong. I mean, we came here, we killed the Indians, we held slaves. He even blames us, I think, for World War II. This seems to be a theme on the left, is that America is basically a force for ill, a force for bad, capitalism, a force for bad. Give me the other side of that. What is the argument that young people should know when they're confronting their professors with the history of America?
Well, I don't want to say I take a nuanced view on that, because I don't, but I do believe the U.S. government is a force for ill in my life and in the lives of a lot of people. But in terms of the people of America, that's what I love. When I say I love America, I don't mean like I love the fact that we have a bicameral legislature and an upper body. What I love about America is the people, our traditions, our culture. I would be a fish out of water anywhere else in the world. And when you say that America is a force for ill in the world, if you're talking about the American people, I just don't believe it. Because for one thing, I don't believe capitalism's a bad thing. I think capitalism ought to be embraced. The word ought to be embraced. We ought to celebrate it. We ought to mock and ridicule people who oppose it. Because if they really believed in the welfare of the poorest, they would be the biggest capitalists of all. If you look at how well are the poorest people in a society doing all over the world, the single biggest indicator of how well they're going to be doing is how much economic freedom there is in that country. That's just a fact. Even if you're talking about the Scandinavian countries, which are always thrown in our face, look at the Scandinavian countries. They have big government presence and they're doing very well. Well, a couple of things. They have a lot of capitalism too that overcomes the big government presence. They actually have, in some cases, more competitive economies than we do, and better rule of law and monetary policy and all that. But also, if you actually measure how well Swedes do in Sweden and how well Swedes do when they come to America, well, in many cases, they earn 50 to 100% more in America. So yeah, they do really great in Sweden, but they do even better under American capitalism. So hooray for it. And in fact, over the past 200 years around the world, just 200-year period, there has been an 11-fold increase in the per capita income. Even if we include the worst, most backward, I dare not say a certain word, countries in that calculus,
Yeah.
We still have seen an 11-fold increase. In some parts, it's been even more than that. I mean, we've gone from, in other words, people used to, in 1820, people were living on $3 a day. And on average in the world, it's now $33 a day. And in the advanced countries, it's $100 a day. And in a pinch, you could get by on $100 a day, because people do. A lot of people get by on $100 a day. Mm-hmm. The point is, nothing like this in terms of the growth in the standard of living has ever been seen in the history of the world at any time ever. And this happened overwhelmingly in spite of government involvement. It happened because of capital accumulation and the push on the standard of living that's caused by that. So I don't want to hear these people grousing and whining about the poor. They've done, the only thing those folks have done is made this process prolonged.
Now, what about when you talk about the government? The government has been, in the last, really since World War II, I guess it is, maybe since FDR, the government has grown exponentially. It has reached into especially the federal government, it reaches into every aspect of our lives. But before that, we really did have a hands-off government for a very long time. And it really showed in the way that America became the great engine of democracy that it was. I mean, isn't that what made America great?
Yeah, the United States became the greatest industrial power in the world, uh, basically before it even had an income tax. I mean, just right around
Right.
that decade. And then when they introduced the income tax, it was so minor, almost nobody even noticed it was there. So yeah, all these things did indeed happen just because that's how a free, spontaneous people operates. But if you read a typical textbook, it doesn't have to be Howard Zinn. The textbook you get, I remember perfectly well what seventh grade was like. The textbook was, if it weren't for your wise overlords in Washington, D.C., you and your kids would be working in a coal mine for 3 cents a day, getting your limbs blown off, and every sandwich you eat would probably be poisoned, and your toaster would be exploding, and your TV monitor would be blowing you into bits. And people just go ahead and accept that. And I get why they say that. But every aspect of this is wrong. The reason people had low standards of living 100 or 200 years ago is that the whole society was poor at that time. It wasn't because all the rich people were hoarding all the big screen TVs for themselves. There weren't any of those things. And if you tried to solve this problem through redistribution, all right, well, everybody would get like 1/10 of an extra chicken leg, and that'd be the end of it. It would not have solved anything.
Yeah. So when I look at the young, especially millennial generation, people in college, relentlessly fed this diet, this intellectual diet of anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism. I mean, they go out and they follow Bernie Sanders, who is essentially preaching the gospel that left Venezuelans eating their cats, and people are cheering for this clown, a guy who honeymooned in the Soviet Union. Now, you have a website, tomsfreebooks.com, and you have books that you give away there, basically, say Bernie Sanders is wrong. Are you optimistic about reaching the young? Do you feel that there's any chance to turn this generation around and re-educate them?
You hate to see history have to repeat itself in order for another generation to learn its lesson. But you almost think unless these kids get what they're asking for good and hard, almost nothing can reach them. But on the other hand, there is a minority of younger people who aren't just people who listen to 3 sentences of Bernie Sanders, but who read real books and who think maybe there's more to the world than gimme, gimme, gimme as an economic policy. And those are the people I think are reachable. And I think those are the ones who are more likely to be active. I mean, what could be easier and lazier than just to accept the Bernie Sanders view of the world? It's very surface level. There's no depth to it. Not much, frankly, not many IQ points behind it. The really bright kids are the ones who are starting to question this whole thing. So that sort of makes me feel a little bit better. But in terms of the sorts of things that he tries to argue, whether it's the minimum wage or all the sorts of arguments he makes, yeah. So I, as you say, I came up with a book called Bernie Sanders is Wrong. I thought, why not just be blunt? And so I just have every single chapter, whatever you hear him talk about, I've got something that goes in and refutes him, whether it's inequality or it's the minimum wage or whatever it is that he's calling for. Every single one of these things can be refuted, or we should be more like Denmark. What I like about your point about Venezuela is that when they actually asked Bernie Sanders, do you have any comment about what's going on in Venezuela? I mean, you call yourself a socialist sometimes, and these are people who actually did it. Do you have any comment on that? And he actually said no comment.
Wow.
And yeah, maybe I wouldn't have a comment either in that situation. Whereas the funny thing is, the polar opposite of Bernie Sanders would be Ron Paul. And even if you're asking him a really hard question that probably in his heart of hearts he doesn't want to answer, I never heard that guy say no comment. I'll give an answer that all my campaign managers are going, oh, why is he not just sidestepping this? At least the guy gave us an answer. This creep won't even tell us, he's too busy moving from one of his 3 houses to the other to tell us how he feels about people scrounging around for scraps in a country that took his advice.
Now, you describe yourself, speaking of Rand Paul, you describe yourself as a libertarian. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Can you define that? What does that actually mean? Because every time I listen to libertarians, all they talk about is dope, is pot. And I keep thinking, I'm sorry, but that's just not the thing that wakes me up in the middle of the night worrying for my country.
No, it's not. And I mean, you're looking at the squariest of the square among the libertarians.
Okay.
Right? I mean, we drive a minivan with the kids and all that. So I've never consumed any of that stuff at all. So as I say, I'm totally square. My view is if somebody wants to do that stuff, I don't think the best way to fight against that is to ruin the person's life.
I agree.
Or
I
throw
agree.
them in a cage and
Yeah.
get it. You know, I mean that.
But
I mean,
but
I
what
think
is
it ought to be dealt with on a more local level. But what are libertarians all about? We're not all
right?
about, pot is incidental to the
Okay.
question.
Okay.
If somebody's trying to tell you we're about pot, let me be perfectly blunt with you. They're cowards
Hmm.
who understand that libertarians believe in a lot of unpopular things. So they'd rather kiss up to you by saying, hey, we're for cool things that you like. Whereas I feel like it's better to be just blunt and honest up front. And if we're
Okay.
going to like each other, fine. If not, or maybe you'll come to like me a year down the road when you think about it, but it's better than being dishonest. All it means is that we believe that people should interact with each other on a voluntary basis. No initiation of force against other people. It should be entirely peaceful. That's all we believe. So that doesn't mean that any peaceful thing somebody does, I personally endorse. I think a lot of knuckleheads out there who do stupid things all day. But I also believe that I have plenty on my plate as a father of 5 kids as it is. And it's everybody's responsibility to look after his own hearth and home first. And that was the old traditional conservatism was mind your own business.
So what is
that is the first principle.
Where does that become unpopular? I mean, that seems pretty basic Americanism. To each his own. Takes different kinds to make a world.
Well,
right. So
it becomes unpopular. Becomes unpopular if I say, therefore, I want to abolish antitrust law. Oh, wait a minute, I just lost a lot of people. Or I don't think there should be a minimum wage. Ouch. Or and so I can keep on going. Or I would like to see the government have to raise money through bake sales. Just like we used to see. The Pentagon should have a bake sale. I like the whole government to have to do that. I'd like them to have to scrounge around to wonder where their resources are going to come from. It comes when you say end the Fed. It comes so there's a lot of possible unpopularity, but when I look at how screwed up American society is, so far away from where I'd like to see it, I'm not afraid of holding an opinion that the New York Times doesn't approve of, and even, frankly, that the Weekly Standard doesn't approve of. I'm not particularly impressed with the job either of these sources has done.
So you're also, I believe you're a convert to Catholicism, right? You were Lutheran and you're—
That's right.
And
so speaking of unpopular positions.
Well, I'm a convert from Judaism to Episcopalianism, so I'm close.
Okay.
But now where do you put it? This is a question I get all the time because I'm basically a libertarian. I have a few conservative views, but basically a libertarian. But a lot of people say I'm very much opposed to abortion. And people say, well, aren't you a libertarian? Why should the government interfere in this process? Where do you stand on this?
Well, but it would be like saying I'm against murder and I think people should be punished for murder. We wouldn't say, I thought you were a libertarian. Well, okay, but I do believe that it's okay for anybody in the world to do the right thing. So even a government official, it's okay for that person to stop me from killing somebody.
Right.
I'm okay with that because it's okay for anyone to do the right thing. So when it comes to abortion, there is actually debate among libertarians about abortion. There's a group called Libertarians for Life. And they generally make secular arguments against abortion.
Yes.
Although there's nothing preventing a libertarian from making a religious argument against abortion. But the argument would be that if an unborn child has rights, then it would be aggression to deprive that unborn child of rights. And the argument would kind of run like this. If I put you in a condition where you are at risk, you're in danger. Like, for instance, let's say I can fly my own plane. I put you in my plane and we fly up 10,000 feet. While we're at 10,000 feet, given that I put you in that position, I can't announce, well, I'm kind of tired of your company. I don't want you around anymore, and just throw you out and say, look, I'm just expelling him from my private property.
Right.
Not so. I put that person in that dangerous situation. Well, likewise, in the vast majority of cases, a child winds up in the womb for reasons we all understand.
Right.
And that child has been put in that vulnerable situation. And therefore, you can't just do the equivalent of throwing the child out at 10,000 feet. And also, I mean, one of the arguments that you even hear some libertarians use for abortion is the argument of Judith Jarvis Thompson from the 70s that the child is like a parasite or a trespasser.
Yes.
Now, we can get into the biology of what parasites are, but in terms of trespassing, if trespassing means being where you're not supposed to be, where is the child supposed to be if not the womb?
Fair enough. I'm running out of time. Can you give me a quick answer to this? When you look at Donald Trump, is he helping your cause or hurting it?
I would say a little bit of both.
Okay.
I like that he's slashing and burning some things, but he's not slashing and burning nearly enough.
Okay.
But I'm willing to be converted. I'll say that.
Interesting, interesting. Tom Woods, tomsfreebooks.com, the author of several books, including the Politically Incorrect History of America. Is that what it's called?
Politically Incorrect Guide to American History.
Guide to American History. Thank you very much for coming on. It's been good talking to you.
Thanks.